So this morning, I'm really excited to welcome Scott Campbell from Persist Nashville. Persist is a nonprofit with the mission to help students transition from high school to post-secondary education. Its purpose is to empower Nashville's graduates to earn a college degree at a time really when only 1 out of 4 Metro Nashville graduates are completing higher education. The work here focuses on coaching, encouraging students, investing in student leaders to build community on their campuses and connecting students with caring professionals in the area. I know folks are going to be interested in learning more, and I'm going to quickly introduce Scott, and then we'll get right to the conversation. Scott Campbell is the executive director and co-founder of Persist. He's a former classroom teacher and administrator working at more than 6 different urban, rural, and suburban schools. He's led and taught at traditional public schools, magnet schools, charter schools, and before co-founding Persist, he was the principal of Republic High School in Nashville. Scott also serves on the Tennessee Charter Commission Appeals Committee and is a part of SCORE's Complete Tennessee Leadership Institute's 2022-2023 class. So please join me in welcoming Scott. Scott, we're really excited to have you here. Maybe we'll start with giving you the opportunity to share a bit about Persist, and then we'll jump into to questions. So Scott, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, David. Hey, everybody, Scott Campbell, Executive Director of Persist Nashville. Thanks for that warm introduction, and really just appreciate the opportunity to be able to be here and share a little bit about our work. I'm going to share a little slide deck with you for about the next 11 minutes and just kind of give you a little bit of background on the work we're doing and what we're learning through this process and some of those results. I'll start with just our mission. At Persist Nashville, we empower Nashville graduates to earn a college degree. This is our mission statement. And the reason why we do this is because currently only 27% of students who graduate from Metro Nashville public high schools are earning a 2-year, 4-year, or a technical degree. And this is about half the national average when we look at that overall number. Our mission, which we started in 2019, is around how do we get in here and fill this really important needed gap in that process as students are making that important transition from that 12th grade year into their college experience. And our goal is to double the rate of college graduates coming from Nashville high school. So I think to understand the problem, it's really important to kind of understand the pipeline. Where are we losing students? What's happening to Nashville graduates right now is that about 21%, and this is pre-pandemic numbers, but I'm going to share with you the impact of the pandemic as well. But pre-pandemic, about 21% of students were planning not to go to college. This is slightly below the national average, which is in that 80 to 82%, but pretty much on par, which means that our access organizations, the Oasis and Martha O'Brien Centers and Connexions of the world are doing really good work at helping our students kind of get ready for and applying for college. But where we really start to fall off in Nashville is that if you have 100 students, 20 of them are melting or summer melt. They're never actually enrolling in college. And this rate is more than double the national average. And then an additional 15% of students are leaving within their first year and not re-enrolling in college in that second year. So that means we only have 44%. 56% of students are gone 1 year after graduating. And then we get down to that 27% when we look at this overall 6-year graduation rate. So that's kind of the specific target area we saw, okay, there's a huge need here in Nashville, and I think we have potential to have an impact. Unfortunately, and I know that you've heard this if you've attended any of the Friday Focus before, the gap has grown even further during the pandemic. During the pandemic, in Nashville, 55% of students never enrolled out of the classes of 2020 and 2021. So we're way even behind those numbers, that 59%, 60% we were pre-pandemic. This 45% is a huge challenge to us as a city and as a state as we think through how do we not only support upcoming classes of 2023 and beyond, but what do we need to be doing to support those students as we go back? And that really just means there are 5,170 students approximately who never enrolled in college out of those 2 classes right here in Nashville. And they're still here in Nashville working and doing work. And that's one of our many goals in Persist Nashville is to figure out how do we support these students as well as continuing to support better the classes as we move forward. So first thing that I just wanted to define, because I think it's really easy. And I have conversations all the time and people say, well, I don't know whether everyone needs to go to college. And I say, well, first of all, when you think college, and this is a problem that our students have too, are you defining it as a 2-year, 4-year technical degree? And that's what we support. We support students in state, out of state, public, private, 2-year, 4-year technical. Any of those technical certification all the way through a master's degree or doctorate degree is earning those credentials that are going to lead to far better outcomes for yourself economically and opportunities to have a big impact. And we truly believe that college isn't going anywhere. And I know that's something that we'll talk a little bit about with David in a bit. So how do we address this problem? There's really 3 buckets of work that Persist Nashville does. The first is coaching. So every single one of our students is assigned a coach, a professional coach. I have a great team of 8 team members, all have 5+ years experience, either in higher education or working in the K-12 space, and they're texting our students. So one of the things, and I'll talk about this in a second, that we realized we would need to do this work well is scalability, the ability to be able to do this in a cost-conscious way. And the only way you can do that is by increasing your coach to student ratio. And the only way you can do that is through technology, right? You have to have a good case management system. So our coaches during the summer are coaching over 300 students and helping them with enrollment. And then during the academic year, they're working about 150 to 175 students. And every single week, they're texting students and checking in and sending the messages and coaching students through text or setting up calls or getting on campus to meet with them. But there's this constant set of communication, and students can reach out to us at any point in time. The second bucket of work we do is community. We actually develop student leads. We currently have 14 campus leads on 12 different campuses. So last night I was at Lipscomb with about 50 of our students, and our campus leads had a little event. This afternoon, I'm actually going to UTK to Knoxville. I may or may not be going to a football game on Saturday. But today I get to go spend some time with some students and just have a meal with them and kind of be part of their community there. But this is really particularly about building community for students of color who are at a PWI or a predominantly white institution. It's so important for students to feel like they have a community among students who come from a similar background and experience. But we support all students from Nashville, regardless of that economic or their college choice. And then the third is care. Every single one of our students has access to what we call the Persist Fund. This could be something like a book or an online book or resource, but it can also be transportation need, food need. We've bought glasses for students. We've helped get cars out of the wrecker service so students could get to class. There's been a whole variety of different types of things that students have needed. And also in this bucket is how do we connect our students with those career opportunities that are going to advance and then after they leave and get their college degree. And so many of you on this call, I'm sure, are very familiar with many of the different organizations that do college access and persistence work, whether it's Georgia State, who does this institutionally, KIP or KIP through College, who does this work at all of the KIP schools throughout the country, or Inside Track, which is now a non-for-profit, but previously a for-profit that works with universities through text-based coaching to reach out to students. We're really taking little bits and pieces of their model, and we're working with a lot of our local partners that I referred to, like Connexion, and Oasis, and Martha O'Brien Center, but we're doing it at a larger scale. So we're taking these ideas and saying, listen, we're putting our flag in the ground to say every single student who graduates from a Nashville high school should get a college degree and should get the support that they need to be able to get that college degree. So I know you may be asking, what are the things that are actual barriers for students? And these are what we would have identified over the past 3 years as the biggest barriers towards students' persistence. And these may be some that you're familiar with, and they may not be. I mean, obviously managing finances, navigation of the system, dealing with crisis or things, particularly if you're a first generation student. If mom or dad or grandparent gets sick and you have to miss a couple of days of classes, for some students, that's it. They just stop. They don't have either the background or experience know how to follow up, or they get behind. It could be a big barrier. Small financial needs can have a huge influence on a student's persistence in school as well. But the other ones, right, we obviously know academic preparedness, but two things that I think are not talked about enough in this space. One is undermatching. So students choosing a college that is not actually at their academic level, that may even be below, because they can get more financial aid there. And then they actually get there and they don't feel engaged, they don't feel involved, they don't feel like they're part of the community. And then students just feeling that they don't belong, right? Institutional commitment and sense of belonging are two of the biggest reasons why students will either persist or not persist in college. So how have we done? Over the course of the past 3 years, we've seen some really positive results. I think one of the biggest results we've seen is when we talk about this summer melt enrollment work. Students who engaged with Persist out of the class of 2021 enrolled at a rate of about 66%, which is much lower than we wanted. But students who didn't engage with Persist, and we were able to look overall at the district, engaged or enrolled at a rate of about 32%. Since we were working with about a third of the graduates of that year, we had a big impact on students actually enrolling in college. Now, but the big, and I'd say the biggest thing that is important to us outside of this is how do we continue to work with them to persist? And so, we saw this kind of 34%, and every single year we've seen students engaging with Persist enrolling at a rate of higher than 30% better than their peers. We've served about 2,700 students, and we want to serve every student who graduates from Nashville high schools. And the other thing about this is we've done this at about $321 per student. So a much lower cost per student than those other programs. And we've been able to access a lot of students because we've had a lot of really great partners. And this is both on the financial side, but also just on the day in, day out. We have students and we want you to serve them. So Metro Nashville Public Schools, we have a 3-year MOU with them to be able to serve students at every single one of those high schools. And we've also had really great partnerships with Republic, Intrepid, and Valor, 3 charter schools in Nashville. And one of my favorite partnerships has been with the YMCA Latino Achievers and Black Achievers program, where we've served every single one of the students who've been in their program in high school and helped them persist in college. So we've had some really great partners, and we've served students from 27 different high schools and at 109 different colleges and universities in state and out of state. And so the way that we kind of engage with students in the first place this past spring is we've built through Salesforce a CRM that allows us to be able to give students an end-of-year survey and give schools data. So in the spring at 11 schools, we surveyed 1,735 students. Every single one of those students actually got a list. They said, I'm going to University of Memphis. We sent them, here's the 5 things you need to do for Memphis. If they said they wanted to be a registered nurse, we sent some information from College from TN website about how they can find out more about that career. And then students engaged in coaching from there. So that's this kind of enrollment support that we offer to every single student who graduates from Nashville high schools. The next level of support is getting that persistence coaching. So we serve this summer around 1,700 students, and we have around 900 students who are working with us in persistence work or have engaged in what we call Persist Scholar over the course of the academic year. And then we also have something that we've started to pilot a little bit about how do we gamify this college persistence process through Persist Plus, but more to come on that later. The second bucket of work that we do is community. And we, like I said, we have 14 campus leads. They're going to host 6 meals on their campus, 3 in the fall, 3 in the spring during the year, bringing other students together. They're going to check in on their peers twice a month. So there's over 18 touch points by a campus lead with all of their peers on campus, in addition to hearing from their coaches on a regular basis. And like I said, the last bucket of work is care. We've actually distributed over $63,000 in Persist funds this year, and that is a max of $200 per student. So we've had $42,000 of requests in the past 2 months. But we're also connecting our students with mentors. So we've had 64 mentors who have been meeting with students over the past year and have signed up for this fall. And then we also have been working to try to build for our students meaningful career opportunities. We call these career cohorts. There's more to find out on our website if you're interested. From all of this, in the persistence side, we've seen about a 13% or better persistence rate of our students who are enrolled in our program in college. And students are enjoying it. This is probably my favorite stat, is that 92% of students said that who've been part of our program said that they would recommend it to a friend. And our kind of new goal is we want 75% of our students who participate in Persist Scholar to get a degree. And that's really our commitment, is that 75% or better, which is 3 times what we're seeing here in MMPS, of our students will actually get a degree. All right. That's a lot of information. I will stop and then answer questions from David and the group, but thanks for giving me that opportunity to share a little bit about what we do.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. Really appreciate it. Just a quick reminder, if you have questions throughout our conversation, or you have questions so far, please feel free to just include them in the chat box, and I'll make sure to tee them up for Scott as we go through the conversation this morning. I think, Scott, first thing I'd love to hear a little bit about is like what actually led to your interest in sort of launching this organization. What did you see as a principle that you felt needed solving? Just talk a little bit about kind of the sort of launch of Persist and how you got to sort of professionally feeling like this is something that needed to be addressed.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two things. So first of all, the work of Jennifer Hill and Nashville Public Education Foundation and Bob Obrada and Tennessee College Access and Success Network, when they created the first Bridge to Completion report, which is now just about 4 years old, was just a alarming but really important piece of work for our community. Because what it does is it identified this number. And at the time, it was 24%. It's now 27% of students who are getting a 2-year, 4-year technical degree. Without that information, we probably would not have started Persist. But we knew there was a big problem, and it was district wide, and it was in every single school here in our city. I think the second thing is selfish. I had a group of 115 graduates that I cared very much about who were about to leave our campus and go off into college. And, 83% of them were planning to go to college and university. And yet I'm looking at these overall numbers and saying, I want to make sure these students are actually going to get their degree. And so we went to John Ripka, who's a board member, but is still the CEO of Republic Schools, and said, hey, John, we really want to provide this support, similar to what KIPP does. We want to kind of create a model where we do alumni support for our students. And he said, I love it, and it's too expensive. So if you can come up with a solution that not only serves our students, but serves students as a whole, and do it at a much lower cost per student, then that's something we're willing to entertain and support. So those were the two real factors that led to us going out there and starting to have conversations about, is there a need? Is there momentum around this space? And is there a willingness to partner? We knew we weren't going to be able to do it on our own, but how can we build a partnership and community around this work?
I want to shift, Scott, to some of the data that you shared, and particularly the data around the percentage of students in Nashville who are going on to complete a post-secondary credential or degree. And I know this is a similar challenge that folks across the state are wrestling with right now, and a challenge that probably in a lot of ways has been exacerbated by the sort of upheaval of the last 2.5 years or so on education. And so I'd love to hear you kind of reflect on what you think is leading to that low number. Are there things that we aren't doing broadly as a system that we should be doing in the K-12 space or in the post-secondary space? And then maybe relatedly, how has the last 2.5 years and the decline at the state level and the college going rate impacted the work that you all have done? How have you thought about responding to that?
Yeah, this is a 20-hour conversation that I'll cut down my response to like 30 seconds if I can. So let's start with the why. Right now, there's about a 400-to-1 ratio of counselors to students in our high schools. Our high schools just are understaffed to be able to truly support every student in their college application process, and really even instill that confidence and that excitement about going to college. On top of that, if I'm a counselor, I have to kind of make a decision about when do I kind of stop services with one group so that I can focus in. And that kind of spring of junior year through the fall of your senior year is the most important time in that college application process. So even at schools where they have, which is only 5 high schools of the traditional high schools in Nashville, actually have someone who is a college and career ready coach or counselor, even at those schools, they're going to start focusing more on juniors when the spring semester of a senior year comes. And we're seeing in Nashville that kids are kind of applying to college, but then something happens and there's nobody to kind of work with them through that spring semester of their senior year. And then counselors are off during the summer as well as they should be, but there's nobody connecting with and staying with our students through that summer melt process all the way into the enrollment and all the little things that come up, whether that's financial verification or whether it's a question about orientation, or you just realize that I don't have the money for this school and I need to make a last minute decision. So there's a real gap in kind of our service system. And I think that's probably the biggest thing. If we want to go real deep, if we look at the numbers, there's a huge discrepancy amongst our Black and Latino students and their white peers. And so we have to ask ourselves the question, why is that? And what supports do we need to provide for students around that? What's the pandemic done? It's made it worse. The discrepancy amongst particularly Latino males and their white peers, amongst Black males and their white peers has just grown, right? And so there's something really fascinating that when you actually, if you look at the numbers of persistence of students who are getting into school and starting school, particularly like amongst Latino males, it's at or just as good as their peers, but the actual enrollment is this gap in the system right there. But with Black males, we actually see a huge persistence issue, right? And there's a huge gap there. So there's an additional layer of support. So, I mean, honestly, it's understanding the data. It's about figuring out what the needs are to be able to put people who they trust, that they can listen to, that they can respond to in their life, to answer questions and help them when things pop up, because they do pop up. And it's also just an understanding. It's a really easy thing for us to think once a student has graduated from high school that they're an adult and they can figure this out themselves. But let's understand this fact. Any of us who were an 18 or 19-year-old know we don't know how to navigate the world automatically. And particularly if we don't have a family member who's been to college before or can help us navigate that space, or an immigrant family, that's a real challenge. And so our continuation of the promise we make to students in that 9-12 or K-12 space, it really needs this continued support for at least a year after they graduate on some level to make sure that they're getting the outcomes. Because if I'm being honest with you, David, and we all know this numbers, if you get a high school degree, you don't get a high school degree right now, you're competing for the same jobs. The only thing that's going to truly lead to any greater outcomes for you is getting a college degree or state certification, that allows you to be able to get those more higher paying jobs and more choice.
Yeah. Scott, I want to build on one point that you just made, and something we've been thinking a lot about on the SCORE team is just the reality of the kind of economic climate right now. And the example that I know our team talks a lot about is talking to a student. I think the student was in Memphis who said, why would I go on to get a college degree right now when I can make $25 an hour at Hobby Lobby, right? And I'm curious about how that conversation is showing up in the conversations you're having with students right now or over the last year. How do those conversations go? What are you sharing with students? I think this is sort of not only is a challenge around college going right overall, but also just like the fact that, folks can get a job pretty quickly too. And in some ways is maybe sort of getting students to rethink the value proposition a bit. So I'm just curious about how you talk about that with students as you're coaching.
Sure. I think there's three different approaches. First of all, I'm a numbers guy. And so, you just approach with the numbers, right? That even if you work and you get that earning for those 4 years and you're not enrolled in school, by the age of 27, this person who went to college has earned more gross. And over the course of their lifetime, they're going to earn $17K or more per year for the rest of their life. So if you can get students to understand, that's hard, that understanding of that you're going to be earning more over the course of your lifetime, and that's going to lead to $900,000 to $1 million more over the course of your lifetime, the big picture, that's one piece. Two, I think it has a lot to do with representation and seeing themselves in this space. So I think there's just like a really important work that we have to do around helping our students understand that they too can end up in these. And there's lots of different jobs, right? Most students leave school saying, I want to be a doctor or a lawyer or maybe an engineer. It's like there's so many, as we know this, right, of different types of opportunities. So surrounding them with people who are mentors, who kind of have different experiences voices and maybe who represent some of the same backgrounds as them, I think is a really important piece, having those voices in their life, kind of telling them there's lots of different choices here. This is going to give you more choice. And I say this over and over again in schools when I'm at a high school, is like the worst place to be in the world is stuck, where you don't have a choice. You have to work 2 jobs, and you can't move and pick up your family and go to another place. And if you quit this job, there's not an immediate another opportunity that's going to lead to the same amount. And that's really the kind of key message that I keep having in schools with students, and that our team is having with, is like, we just want you to have choice. and that's what a college degree really opens up. So I think that's a really, really important piece. And then the third thing that I'll just state is, let's work with these partners, right? Amazon offers free tuition benefits to students who work at Amazon, and they're paying $20 an hour to work in their warehouse. Well, those students are not going to work in their warehouse for 20, 30 years, right? They want, and Amazon wants, this is a mutually beneficial thing. They want those students to work their way up through and then get into the C-suite at some point in time. Well, the problem is even if they offer tuition benefits and students are working, there's no one who helps them with that enrollment process. And then, as we're seeing, having a coach or someone who can walk you through the process is so vitally important. So I think there's just like a really unique opportunity to solve 2 problems. One is the diverse talent pipeline that our businesses are looking for, and 2 is the college persistence numbers. And if we can start to work together as CBOs and businesses in our K-12 system, I think we could actually come up with something really creative that's going to help our students say, I still have a job because I have to work, and I'm getting my degree, and I see this vision of what it could look like for me to end up in this business and upskilled, as opposed to just switching every 3 or 4 years to new businesses.
I want to turn to a question or 2 about the model itself. And we also have some questions that have come in from folks who are joining us this morning. Again, just would encourage folks, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat box and we'll get to them. But first, Scott, you talked a bit about the emergency funds that you provide to students. Would love to hear a little bit more about what that looks like. And then we have a question from somebody who asked specifically, are there other grants or funds that are also now available to help you serve students that are an important part of alleviating the cost of college or transitioning to college that y'all are taking advantage of as well?
Sure. So part of this is scalability for us. How do we do this at a low cost per student? And so we can't offer students, a $5,000 scholarship to be part of our program. And honestly, if you look at Kalamazoo Promise, you look at Pittsburgh Promise numbers, they're offering anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 scholarships to students. And they're only seeing a 7% increase in the amount of students who are getting degrees. So I'm not sure whether just throwing more money is the solution through tuition, but these small non-tuition crises for students can have a big impact. And so when a student needs something, they just send a text to their coach and say, hey, I heard about this Persist Fund, or you told me about this. We send them a link. They say what the specific need is. We will get that need for them. There may be a couple questions asked if we need to get a login or whatever. We're not giving them cash directly, but we're trying to give them or pay for something that's going to help them at that moment. The other piece of that is it just builds a relationship. They know that they have a team and a coach on their side who they can respond to them and help them in those times of need. Now, I love what Chrissy has been doing with Knox Promise and Chrissy D'Alejandro and Tennessee Achieves. And now they've expanded that through some grants through the state, across the state, to be able to offer a much larger amount than we can offer to students in these kind of financial emergency systems. And you also have Nashville Grad that applies to students at our 2-year universities here in Nashville. They also have some of this financial emergency support. All of those programs are amazing. They're still serving a very small percentage of students. We're serving 73% of students with with Persist Scholars that are in 4-year universities. Those same programs that are set to meet students who are either EFC zeros at our community colleges or just at a specific community colleges don't necessarily apply to students who may be going to a Lipscomb or Belmont or Vandy. And those students have needs as well. I had a conversation with a kid last night who was like, I found, he says, I have ADHD. And one of the best ways for me to study is to write on a whiteboard. He's like, I came in here last night and I was writing on a whiteboard and it really helped me. I said, do you have a whiteboard in your room? He's like, no. And I was like, well, do you need one? He's like, yeah. I was like, wait, but I can't afford it. I said, well, put it in a Persist fund, right? This is what it's for. We will buy you a whiteboard, put it up in your room, and then you can start studying. You've learned something about yourself. We can provide that. You can have it within a week and you're going to do better on exams, right? These are the types of like little ways that we can kind of respond to students' needs to help them. So I'm a huge proponent of this. And I think, it doesn't necessarily require us to do a massive investment of scholarship funds or tuition. And the only other thing I want to say about cost of college, because it's such a common thing, David, is that if you are an EFC 0 student, that means your estimated family contribution is $0 and what would be considered maybe lower income. And so you're Pell eligible. College can be almost free for you, right? Even at a 4-year institution, right? You're talking about $6,900 in Pell grants. If you had a 3.0 GPA in high school, you're talking about $4,500 in Hope Scholarship availability. You're also looking at an additional $2,000 to $2,500 in TSAA grant. When you start stacking that, you're looking at $14,000, $15,000 in free aid to be able to go to college, which covers your tuition costs. So for students who particularly are coming from low-income backgrounds, the cost barrier is no longer there. Tennessee has done a really good job at trying to break those down. But there is still an access and persistence barrier, which has a lot more to do with knowing how to access these resources and less about just the actual financial money they need to be able to attend.
One more question, or maybe two more questions about the model, and then we'll zoom out and maybe ask a question or two about how to think about replication and additional models in other places across the state. But first, would love, Scott, for you to talk a bit about the partnership with the Metro Nashville School District, Metro Nashville Public School District. What does that look like? How's that partnership been going? And sort of even from the perspective of how you identify what students you're focused on, what schools you're focused on and targeted, like what does that sort of relationship look like with the school district?
Yeah, well, I'm super thankful for that MNPS has been willing to partner with us. I really credit a lot of that to Carrie Randolph, who's now left for Chattanooga 2.0, but she was such a great champion of saying, hey, there's a need. I'd say the reason why the district has been willing to partner is because I raise my hand a lot and they're like, we need help with this. And I'm like, I'll do it. And we've jumped in a lot of ways, kind of outside the model of college persistence and started to do a lot more access work. So over the past couple of years in the pandemic, when numbers were really low about Tennessee Promise FAFSA completion numbers, we've jumped in and helped work with a lot of those community partners that I talked with before on just coordinating what we call FAFSA blitzes, getting on campus with 15 to 20 different trained people to work with students and help them solve those FAFSA needs. So a lot of our work kind of with them helped, the relationship helped that we were just willing to help in different ways outside of that work. We've also helped develop a curriculum for MNPS for the Promising Scholars Program. That is a college and career ready curriculum that was used in high schools in the summer Promising Scholars over the past summer. Now, when it comes to this college persistence work and why they were willing is because obviously the pandemic, our schools were just having trouble really getting connected with and supporting every single student. And we're like, well, let's jump in there. And so they signed a 3-year MOU that gives us access to being able to be in our schools and then coach students in those schools. This past year, the reason why we surveyed only 1,753 out of about 4,700 graduates is because they gave each counselor in each school a choice on whether to take kind of an end of year survey through the district or to take our end of the year survey, and then students would have access to coaching. And so that was really just a counselor choice. This year, the district has chosen to do their own survey, but they're going to allow us to be able to have the data to be able to reach out to students and allow students to kind of get that support. So I think it can look a lot of different ways. I will say the ways that has been most successful is having that opportunity to go in person, meet students, have a warm handoff from a trusted partner. And we've been able to do that in a number of our charters. At Valor Collegiate Academies, we actually met with every single graduate and their families to talk through their fit decisions in the spring. And then we were able to continue to coach, and I'll see a number of those students this afternoon. And the same work we did with Latino achievers and Black achievers has been really powerful, because the Latino achievers and Black achievers counselors are passing them off to us and saying, hey, this is your new familia. They're now going to support you as you go into your college years. And then we have those monthly meetings where we talk about data, we talk about students, and we can kind of say, hey, I haven't heard from this kid in a while. And they say, oh, I have. And then we can kind of exchange information. That type of like case management really helps us serve students better and be able to solve problems when we just haven't heard from the student in a while.
So 2 final questions about Persist, and then we'll wrap up our session today, Scott. First, one of the things I've been wondering, not just about the Persist work, but about work that many organizations are doing around college persistence and success, is just a wondering of whether ultimately this is work that institutions should be doing, and or work that institutions should have as sort of core to how they're supporting students. And I wonder what your reaction would be to that thought. And what's the sort of future of this work look like in a way that's serving all students in a more robust and intentional way?
Yeah. So great question. I mean, the work at what Georgia State has done has been amazing, right? And you see they flipped it to where students who are first gen, are persisting at rates better than students who are non-first gen, right? That shows that this support works, but that takes a lot of time and a lot of money, right? The goal of every nonprofit should be to not exist, if we're being honest, right? We shouldn't have to do this work because the institutions, our K-12 institutions or higher, are doing it so well that there's not a problem, right? We solve a problem. Once it's solved, you go away. So I don't think that we have to be there. I would love for, whether this is a state initiative or whether this is an institutional initiative, I think it can happen. I will just say this. I think that, or I have seen at times they say, well, we'll just do this ourselves. and we're going to get a lot of people to do it, and we're going to spend a lot of money on creating a system or wheel that already exists. I think one of the value-added propositions that we've been able to offer, and I see this particularly with some of the charter schools, is like, okay, you can create your own program and start from scratch and do all the things yourself, or you can use ours, which is about 1/8 of the cost. And so the cost conscious nature, right? I think partnerships and these relationships that we can have, if there's somebody doing this work at a much lower cost, then just partner with them, right? And they can do that work in relationship with you. And then over time, adopt those practices, and hopefully the problem gets solved and you no longer need to contract or work with them. But that's kind of been our approach, is to say, not only do we feel like this work is important and we can do this work well, but we can also do it a lot less expensive than if you tried to do it yourself.
And then, Scott, to build on that, we had a question from someone who asked if they're interested in launching this kind of work in another part of the state. Any advice on getting started, where to start, how to start? I think you've answered this a bit around just like not feeling like you have to start from scratch, but any other advice you would have? And then also for organizations, whether they're in Nashville or other parts of the state, who may be interested in engaging or amplifying the work that you're doing, any thoughts or advice for those partners as well?
I mean, the first thing is feel free to reach out and let's have a conversation and talk about it. We may not be the solution, but we'd love to be able to kind of help you brainstorm and think through that process. And like I said, we don't have it all solved. We're making mistakes and learning from those mistakes, but we're 3 years of mistakes ahead of where you might be if you're just starting this process right now, right? And I do hope that we're using data to help us inform our decisions as we move forward. And the second thing is look at your community-based organizations that exist that may be doing this work, and don't be afraid to partner. I think I get, FERPA is so important, protecting student data is so important. And then sometimes we allow this kind of data thing and even the thought of it to just totally shut down that, hey, I might be able to work with a partner who can do this work really effectively. You just have to create the right protections of student data and student information. And you have some partners out here who could do an amazing job. We're not alone in this work. There are some other folks doing some really good work. And the last thing I'll just say is keep this broad picture, right? If we really want to give students choice, don't just limit to say, hey, this support is only to X students who are going to X colleges or universities. I think one of the things that I've been really thankful for is, like, I serve students at Princeton and Stanford, and we serve students at, Nashville State and Ball State and Fisk and Vanderbilt and TSU and all the schools, right? And that's a really rich opportunity to say, regardless of the choice you make, and we're not like bound to one school or one type of education choice or another, you're going to get somebody who cares about you that can help you make that decision smart. So as you're thinking about this as a school district, try not to limit that they have to go to the local college to be able to get this support. But regardless of where they go, they're still your students. And if they know that you're supporting them, they're going to want to come back and be part of that community long term.
Awesome. All right, last question. This is a question, Scott, we ask everyone who joins us on these Friday conversations. Think ahead 20 years or so. Imagine we're in 2040. What do you predict or hope will be the biggest change or biggest improvement in education between now and then? It could be in K-12, could be in post-secondary. What do you hope for? What do you imagine? What do you want to see?
Well, let me start by saying what's not going to happen. Colleges are not going anywhere. The value of a degree is not going anywhere. And I think that is a conversation some people think. We're just going to get rid of colleges and universities, and we're going to go to just pure credentialing and job focus. I'm about to go to UT to visit students and maybe go football game and yell with 100,000 people on Saturday, right? That's not going anywhere. People really value their educational experience, the community there, and that is across the country, right? Dr. Carnevale, who's a Georgetown professor, he estimates that 71% of the jobs that are going to be needed in our country are still going to require a degree in 2030, right? And so jobs are still going to need at least some college experience or 2-year degree or technical degree or 4-year degree. And that's absolutely the same case here in Tennessee. So I'm an optimist. So what's not going to happen is colleges are not going to go away. What I think is going to happen, because as an optimist, is colleges are going to look at these practices that are showing a lot of success. In my view, college persistence coaching and college access coaching is the highest value investment that anyone can make in education right now. Because I truly believe that any student, regardless of your educational K-12 background, can earn a 2-year, 4-year technical degree. Now, you need to have a compelling why. You need to be able to ask for help and know who to ask for help with. And you actually need to be organized and have some of those soft skills of calendaring and those things. But every single student can earn a degree. And so we make a massive investment in this work, which I do think our state and our institutions are going to continue to step up. I think we're going to start to see better outcomes for students. And I think, on the negative side of that is I think institutions that ignore this data and ignore the success that we're seeing are going to struggle. And students are going to start to say, well, I'm getting a coach and I'm getting support and I feel like a sense of belonging, community at this place. And over here, I'm seeing a lower graduation rate and I don't see that. And they're going to start voting with their feet. And so I that's where I see us in 2040 is our colleges are still thriving. And I think in many ways, many colleges and universities are going to get even stronger in this time.
Awesome. All right. So we want to keep these sessions to about 45 minutes or so. I want to respect everyone's busy day on a Friday here. Thank you again, Scott, for being with us, for sharing the exciting work that you and your team at Persist are doing. Really looking forward to staying updated with, I know what will be lots of exciting updates and data and new initiatives that you and your team are leading. We'll just mention we'll have more information coming soon on our next Friday Focus session next month. We'll be sharing the date and our guests very soon. And look for a link to this morning's session. We'll also send out via email this afternoon to the video of this session on our YouTube page, as well as the sessions that we've done over the last few months as well. So thank you all again for joining us. Hope you have a great day, a great start to your fall, and a great weekend. Look forward to seeing you very soon. Thanks again for joining us this morning.
Thanks, David. Go Vols.